everyone, and welcome to the October edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhardt of Conductor, and today is a very special episode because every October we celebrate the birthday of 3030. We turn 5, not necessarily today, but this month. We do it by month over here. And we're going to be talking about the history of the program very quickly and some thank yous out there. But then we're going to get into the stuff that everyone probably came here for, which is, we're going to be talking about Google's passage-based indexing or ranking. A little confusion there, so I'm going to go through that. Also going to talk about Google continuing to have, indexation issues, which is a bummer. We're going to talk about indexing in general. As you can see, there's a theme here this month. A lot of people were talking about, at PubCon, John Mueller of Google had said something about mobile indexing versus desktop indexing, and a lot of folks had got a little confused in there. We're going to talk about content velocity, why you should care about it, and then we're going to come back to my favorite subject, as everyone who joins the program regularly knows, which is link building and something that has to do with that, which is reconsideration requests, and an answer that Google gave on that, how long they take. But let's get into it all because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, happy birthday to 3030. For the last 5 years, I have had the pleasure and the honor of being able to do this program for so many people, across the industry. And I'm always very humbled by, the turnout every month, that come live and also listen to it on demand. So from me to you, thank you all so much for taking 30 minutes out of your very busy days and spending them with me. I love ranting about SEO. I love talking about SEO. I love educating. And, of course, I love interacting with all of you. So thank you so, so much. I say this every time. It's my favorite part of my job. I wouldn't be able to do it without you. Seth certainly wouldn't let me do it without you. And I really appreciate everyone, who comes and joins me every month. It really means a lot to me. So thank you for allowing me to continue to do this program and also for listening to me and my opinions about search. And speaking of opinions on search, let's get into it. So a big thing that has come up that a lot of people are talking about right now is Google's passage-based indexing or ranking, is it? A lot of people are getting a little bit confused about what this means. So basically at Google Search On, they did it a couple weeks ago. There were a lot of announcements about, Google Search and the improvements coming to it. I put a link here. We send this deck out to everyone after every program. So you'll have the link to the article that goes through everything. But in one area they started talking about Google's passage, quote unquote, indexing. So just to give everyone a definition of what that is, basically what it is that Google indexes the entirety of your page, right? And then it ranks you based on the content of the entirety of that page and how well and how relevant it is to a particular query that you put into Google search box. Now, from there, what this is that Google can actually now take certain passages of a page after they index it into account for ranking for very specific queries, right? So if you had something that was very, very specific, let's say, how to build a cedar, bird house or something like that, like something super specific, right? Or what tool should I use for X type of bulk, like something very, very, very specific. Before, Google would use the content of the entirety of the page, right? The entire page and the content that made up that entire page would be what would rank, which is what the basis of the ranking would be. Now, Google's algorithm has gotten advanced enough where it can take passages within the entirety of the text on the page and only rank the page based on that passage for a particular query. Now, that is a big deal. It's a different way of ranking, and also that's gonna impact a lot of queries there, right? Especially very specific ones and sites that have very specific, answers to specific questions or are relevant to specific ideas. Now, there was confusion here because the word indexing was getting thrown around, right? So what happened was it was originally described or understood by a lot of people that Google only indexes the passage on a page and now does not index the entirety of the page. That is not the case. That's where the confusion is, right? So the Google, basically still indexes the entirety of your page, but now better understands the passages within it and can rank your site or your page based only on that passage within the text. But it has nothing to do with how Google indexes your site, and that's where the confusion was, right? So for the passage-based ranking is really what it should be called, passage-based ranking. Google can take a snippet within your site or within your page and rank it based on just that passage. It still indexes the entirety of the page, though, and the entirety of the site. So that's where the confusion was. This is a big deal, in my opinion, because it's a different way that they're going to be ranking sites, and this is something that, for folks who are creating like FAQ content, question and answer type content, or just really talk about very specific things within certain topic sets. This is something that everyone should pay attention to, right? Now, what can you do to benefit from this? Listen, nothing different than what you should have already been doing, right? Is creating really good content that's very, focused in and very informative on the topics and ideas that you're trying to get across, right? But this is a new way, and I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see a lot more answer box queries show up. I'm going to be keeping my eye on that because that's something that, for anyone who follows the program, knows that I keep a big eye on. Is like people also ask, type queries, answer box queries, just snippets in general. And I wouldn't be surprised that as this rolls out, that we're going to see an increase to that. We're going to see an increase in the amount of snippets that we're going to see based on this new passage-based ranking. But again, it is not passage-based indexing, which is what most people are calling it now and talking about it. That is misnomer. That is an incorrect way to describe it. So so just keep that in mind. It's really it's a different way that Google can rank your page, not index your page. And speaking of indexing, Google continues to struggle and had a couple of more issues pop up over the last 30 days, which is a bummer. One was related to mobile indexing, and what was happening there is that folks were seeing pages just drop out of the index because Google wasn't selecting a page to index at all, right? So basically, Google's bot was going through, it was picking up the page, it was looking around, and then it was just determining that it wasn't a page that it should be indexed. And so it didn't index it at all. And then when it was coming to current pages, as I understand it, it was doing the same thing, right? And it was just dropping pages from the index. The other problem was with canonicalization, where basically if you did a URL inspection and put a URL in, it would show that the URL was duplicate and that Google had selected a different canonical, which means that it was also dropping pages from the index and not indexing new pages. So a couple of pretty major issues, honestly, and it lasted for like 8 days. This wasn't like something where it was down like last time. It was down for 4 hours, 3 hours, a day. This was going on for like 8 days. And as a lot of folks know, they actually disabled the submit to index, function in Google Search Console. And to me, they of course said like, yeah, it has nothing to do with that. It clearly has something to do with that. Give me a break. They probably had millions of people, just saying like, index my page, index my page, index my page. And for the most part, Google's just having a bad time right now from an indexation standpoint. And it's interesting because if you join Search On, you read through like all the announcements, they've been working on a lot of enhancements and a lot of stuff within the algorithm itself. So maybe it's not as surprising, that they're appearing a little drunk right now and that things keep messing up. But to the same point, they came out and said that, listen, and they came out with the statement here, basically they were resolving the issues, and they were able to do it around October 1st, October 2nd. But at the end of the day, the first thing to note is that these have been resolved. So if you saw indexing issues across, the beginning, late September, like around the 23rd, and then up until 1st or 2nd, if you were having that issue, this impacted you, and this is what the problem was. There's nothing really to do now, but everyone always should be in Google Search Console, ensuring that your site is being indexed properly, that there's no issues. Everyone should be running a crawl once a month throughout your entire site and make sure there's nothing major happening from a technical standpoint. But at the same time, Google was having indexing issues. So if you experienced that, it probably wasn't your site. It was probably Google. So that's something to know as well. And then continuing to talk about indexing and also pointing out that I made a very rare typo. So that's something for me to take back and reflect on because PubCon doesn't exist. It's PubCon. But for the most part, John Mueller said a couple of things about indexing that confused a lot of people, as I guess everyone does. Everyone just keeps getting confused about things. So what happened here was that John was going through and talking about indexing in general, but specifically mobile indexing, right? And if everyone remembers, back in 2016, that's when Google announced the mobile first indexing initiative, right? But again, like mobile first indexing is kind of a misnomer these days, right? Because at that time, it did make sense. They were still indexing sites based on their desktop, versions. But today, Google only uses their mobile bot to index because it looks at your mobile experience, to index and rank your site. It doesn't look at your desktop at all, really, like completely at all. So what happened is that originally they had said that by March 2020, that would have everything was going to be completely mobile indexing and all that, and everything was going to happen that. So what happened was John came out and said we pushed that due to the pandemic and due to everything else, back to March 2021, where everything will be indexed with the mobile agent, right? And what the confusion was is that I don't think enough people understand that Google only uses your mobile experience to index and rank your site. And I think that's where the confusion was. And again, I say this a lot, but always have to remember that a lot of folks are just getting into SEO and just learning a lot about SEO, so that might not be a detail that they know exactly. But at the end of the day, that is really what people were confused about when John said, the deadline, quote unquote, is March 2021. But at the end of the day, when it comes to indexing, Google only looks at your mobile experience now. And that's why it really should be called mobile only indexing. And you can see in John's tweet down here, he thinks he should have just renamed it to mobile only index, because at the end of the day, they only use your mobile experience. So while none of this is really news, totally understand why some people were kind of like, oh, wait a minute, what does that mean? What do I do with my desktop experience? And as everyone knows, what you do about this, or how you, I guess address this would be the way to say it, is that, you really should be in a responsive design at this point in time. It's 2020. People, really shouldn't have M.dot versions of the site unless there's a really, really good reason to have a separate mobile experience. Everything should be in an adaptive or, responsive design where you have one URL regardless if it's mobile or if it's desktop. Again, Google only uses your mobile experience for indexing and ranking at this point. Now, the March 2021, that's for everything to be indexed only by mobile. I don't know why he even put that out there and said that, but really, it's only it's really happening right now. It's really the mobile-only indexing. So that's something for everyone on the program today to understand, and just to know that Google uses your mobile. There is no the deadline March 2021. That's probably when they shut something off, some legacy system off on their end. But for the most part, Google is 99.99999%, if not 100%, indexing and ranking your site based on your mobile experience. So just keep that in mind. But that's where the confusion was. A lot of indexing stuff with Google this time around. So let's talk about something else. So a few weeks ago, I did a webinar with a bunch of smart folks at Content Marketing Institute, and I got the opportunity to talk about content velocity. And then I wrote an article about it for Search Engine Journal. And this is not a plug for that, but just going through the story. And then I really wanted to kind of talk through it with everyone who joins the program, because I think it's something that a lot of folks could get a lot of interesting insights out of. So for the most part, the first question is, what is content velocity, right? And I pulled this right from my article, because I think it's a good definition of it. And basically, what content velocity is, it's measuring the amount of content a brand is putting out during a defined period of time, right? And that means, so let's say you do 50 blog articles a month. Let's just say that's something that you do. So for the month of October, your velocity would be, 50 a month. And then you can calculate a lot of other metrics around that, like cost. You can estimate the size of a team, or what the makeup of a team looks like. The other question is, why should I care about this? And for me, there are three major use cases, because you can use this to make a case for more resources if you're in the position to build a content team or need more content resources, or SEO resources, honestly. Determining your competitors' resources, so you know what your competitors are spending on it and why they may be beating you or catching up to you. And also estimating the cost of content. One of the hardest parts about any of this is getting people and getting resources. So this is a great way to go to the powers that be and say, hey, I really need this, and and here's why. And you can take a data-driven approach to that. And for the most part, how do you calculate it? The article breaks it down very explicitly. I'm going to go through it high level here. but definitely read the article if you get a chance, if you want to dig in a little bit more, because there's a few tools involved. But in its simplest form, the easiest way to do it is following these steps, right? Step one is getting your blog or content or article pages, right? And an easy way to do that is to go to SEMrush. You can filter down those pages using the URL filter function and then export the final list. Why do we use SEMrush? Mainly because it will pull down every page that you can think of. A lot of people can use GA. I mean, I of course use Searchlight. There's a mix of folks on the program, so that's why I don't make it 100% specific to Searchlight. There's people who aren't Searchlight users on here, and this is kind of the quickest way universally to go out. But whatever tool you're using, if you're using us, if you're using someone else, you can easily do this in your platform as well, and just export all the URLs that are currently sending traffic to your site. Or have the word blog in the URL or article in the URL. But this is a pretty easy way to get it. Step two, if you have Screaming Frog, oh my God, another typo on my part. Man, I must have been up last night doing something. And so step two, put the URLs in Screaming Frog and set up custom extractions. If you are not familiar with how to do custom extractions in Screaming Frog, it is super easy. Screaming Frog has a great guide to it. Just Google Screaming Frog custom extractions, and their guide will come up. And then the way to do this is you would really be looking for three main ones, right? The meta tag publish date, because that's what we're really going after, to get the publish date so that we know how many articles or pieces of content were created in the time period that we're looking for. And there's three ways to do that. You can get through the meta tag. You can get through article schema publish if you have that on, and also the blog posting schema. Most sites have this. And if you want to go a step further, pro tip, if you can get the author as well, this is a good time to pull the author because you can do a lot with that, which I'll get to a little bit later, to pull that data in as well. But keep that in mind, is that the custom extractions are not hard to do. You just put the URLs in, you crawl them, it pulls the publish dates out, and then you know the number of articles or blogs or pieces of content that were created for the time period that you're looking at, right? Step three, repeat step 1 and 2 for your competitors, right? This will give you like the basic velocity metrics, right, for everyone that you compare, and then you can see like who's winning and losing. You can also go now, and you can go deeper here and collect word count, estimate the cost of each article, and that gives you the ability to show like the number of pages created, number of pages per week, per month on average, the average word count, and ultimately the average cost per page, and also the total cost over the period of time that you're looking at. And this is a really cool way and to create a visual that looks something like this with yourself and then a bunch of other folks. So for the most part here, you can see that this is a cool way to say, okay, listen, let's say that you're the first column and your top 3 competitors are the ones to the right. You can say, like, hey, we did 32 pages created in the month of October, let's say, and then they did 70, they did 37, they did 76. So what is the average per week? What's the average word count? And the cool part about this is for the word count, you can, if you get that, because you can pull that from Screaming Frog as well, you can actually estimate the cost, right? Because if anyone here has ever used like a freelance content writing service and thing of that nature, you know that they charge per word, usually like between 20 and 30 cents per word. And whatever you feel comfortable with, I just usually do 25 cents per word. And then you can get the cost per page, like how much did they potentially pay for this, even if it's an internal cost. It's like, okay, so we paid $475, they paid $707, $641, $389, and then ultimately you can get an idea or a ballpark of the entire cost of that project or of that month or creating that content, which is a great way to go to your boss, the powers that be, when you're asking for more resources and say, hey, listen, I think if we want to catch up to our largest competitor, we need to spend about between $30,000 and $40,000 on content. What do you think about that? And you can start that conversation. It's a very data-driven way to tell that story, right? And if you want to take it a step further, you can then go to LinkedIn and you can actually look at the makeup of the team and try to gauge what that looks like. There's a few ways to do this, right? The first one is terrible, but it is worth it in the end. You manually go to LinkedIn profile of yourself and your competitors, and you pull the names and titles from a company's profile. So you're looking for people with content in their title, copywriter in their title, SEO in their title, things of that nature, right? So at the end of the day, that's one way to do it. If you were able to pull the authors during the custom extraction part of this process, you can also then cross-reference that and see what they look like and see if you're missing anybody. So that's just another way to pull even more people. And the third way, and I'm not going to condone this, I'm not saying I've done it, I'm just saying that you can scrape competitors on LinkedIn. You can scrape your competitors' LinkedIn profiles and then quickly just download that and search titles and cross-reference the custom extraction, and it takes like 5 minutes if you can figure out how to go. And again, I'm not condoning scraping LinkedIn. I'm not admitting I've scraped LinkedIn or that I've built stuff to scrape LinkedIn. I'm certainly saying that it is in the realm of possibility. So anyone from LinkedIn listening, not scraping LinkedIn, I'm just saying that you can do it and that it is a possibility, but not condoning it. Conductor in no way condones scraping anything, but scraping LinkedIn. So at the end of the day, that is one thing to keep in mind, but this is a really cool way that you can get a visual that then looks like this. Say your boss comes in and says, hey, listen, they keep beating us consistently, right? They're beating us just consistently. What does their team look like? You can then come back and say, well, we have 4 SEOs, we have about 5 staff writers, and about 200 third-party bloggers, right? They have 1 SEO, and 2 staff editors, and they have 39 staff writers, and only about half, someone who looks like they split their time between content and SEO. And so there's a lot of applications here, to the content velocity metric and how to measure it. And at the end of the day, if anyone's interested in this more deeply, and I apologize for my son screaming in the background, 2020, man. And, at the end of the day, if anyone wants to talk about this a little bit more in depth, please reach out to me, Reinhard@conductor.com. Do this a lot, and I would be happy to walk through the process, talk you through the process, and what type of benefit that you can get, right? And for the last piece, we're going to talk about reconsideration requests, right? So if any, the big question that was posed was, how long does a reconsideration request take? This question actually gets asked quite a bit to me. I get this question answered quite a bit. And for the most part, just to kind of define what a reconsideration request is for anyone on the phone who may not know, basically it's an apology letter to Google after you get a manual penalty. If anyone doesn't know what a manual penalty is, Google can assess someone, a physical person at Google, looks at data all day and determines if people are doing shady things to try and game the algorithm. One of those is link building, as everyone knows, my favorite practice. But also things like spamming and schema, recipes and things of that nature, as I'm sure everyone's read about. And for the most part, you basically have to show your work and apologize to Google several times, and then ultimately they let you out of the penalty. But then they still kind of follow you, for the rest of eternity. So at the end, of the day, think about that. That's what the reconsider request is. Luckily, I have not had to deal with this in a very, very long time because it is terrible, and it takes a really long time. And John Mueller came out the other day and said and pretty much confirmed what everyone knew or thought about the whole thing, is that there is no defined timeline that can be anywhere from weeks to can be anywhere from weeks to months. And I have been part of the months one back in the day when they first started doing these things. So at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you just have to be careful, because getting a manual penalty is super dangerous for your site. It can really hurt your site for a very long time, right? At the end of the day, you want to make sure that if you are doing link building, because again, there are legitimate ways to do link building, and everyone knows my stance on it. But at the end of the day, you just have to make sure that you are building quality links from quality sources and not just spamming and getting as many as possible. If Google catches you, which they will, and you get a manual penalty, you won't even show up for your brand name. You don't rank for anything, and it can I've seen it close businesses. So we don't come across a lot of them anymore because, again, we don't do anything shady here at Conductor. But at the end of the day, you just have to be really careful, because doing a reconsideration request is a morbidly long process, and it really can hurt your business, can hurt your site. I've seen it hurt people's careers before, even if it wasn't their fault, but it was under their purview when it was happening. So just take that into account and understand that reconsideration requests take a really long time, can take months, and for someone to review it. And even if they review it, that doesn't mean you're going to pass. Many times that I've seen them, Google comes back and asks you to show more work or do more, which then resets the entire process. I've seen sites down for 6+ months, and you just can't operate that way. So again, be very careful with what you're doing. Make sure you're not spamming anything. Make sure it's all quality. But at the end of the day, you just have to be really, really careful. And why is that? Because as we all know, we are not chasing algorithms here. We have to make stuff that is quality and exciting for our users to read and experience, right? It's all about the heart, basically what customers want and, understanding what they want and then giving them what they care about, right? And writing things that connect with those two ideas. And that is how you win at all of this, We have a couple of questions. We're getting to the end here. I just wanted to say, thank you once again, 5 years. I can't believe I'm sitting here 5 years later, still running this program pretty much exactly the same way as I ran the first episode. We are 61 episodes in, and I'm so blessed, and I feel very humble that you all join me on a regular basis. I see so many familiar faces here. One thing to note here, as you can probably hear my son screaming in the background, my family and I are back in quarantine, unfortunately. My wife's a school teacher and contracted COVID-19. Please send your prayers and send twisted teas for me. But also, please remember, thank all the teachers and first responders out there. This thing is no joke. My wife is down. V, I love you. I know you're not listening to this, but you can probably hear me since I'm downstairs and you're right above me. But at the end of the day, this thing's no joke. Stay safe out there. And I will get to some questions right now. Let's see. Join late. May have missed this. We're seeing sustained declines after Google's indexing canonical bug. Oh, okay. Is there anything we can do to proactively reverse the impact? Great question. One thing I would do is, something that I always do from there is resubmit your sitemaps. Like, make sure that your sitemaps are in good place, but actually, delete them from Search Console and then resubmit them so that Google goes through your sitemaps again and make sure those URLs are in there. That could jumpstart it. And then also you could use the the submit function. I think it's back up and running. And just do the top level categories of the pages that are not there. Don't just sit there and pump Google with 500 URLs. Go in there, use the top level category, and see if that jumpstarts it. I've seen that work in the past. And let me know how that goes. Indexation issues I've dealt with for the entirety of my career, and still jump on with customers all the time working. So if you can't figure it out, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to jump on the phone and work through it with you. But that's something that I would try. I would try resubmitting your sitemap and then submitting the top level categories that those pages that you're seeing declines in. And then go from there and see if that jumpstarts Google and going through the site. If that doesn't work, go get your log files and see how Google's pinging your site and seeing what the timelines are, because it could be a different issue. But it sounds like they're happening around the same time, try doing that to jumpstart it and see what happens. Let's see. High percentage of Google's market share in search comes from Google being the default search engine on the majority of devices. Very good point. If Apple does develop and release its own search engine, which it might, that's on next episode, so come back next week. We're going to talk about that. It will naturally be the default option on Apple devices, and many Apple cultists will run with it. Very, very good point. What effects do you see such a shift having on the industry? Amazing question. We are going to cover this next time. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think this could actually be something that starts to intrude on Google's market share. Google has got 96% of the search market share. It's basically a monopoly. But I could see with that point exactly that, with everyone who's on this phone, most of you probably have an iPhone. And if Apple comes out with its own search engine, that's going to be the default. I know I don't update my defaults on the phone. I use Safari, and it's just like this. I'm just on my phone. I'm just too lazy to. But at the end of the day, I think that this could intrude. But we will talk about this next week because I want to do a whole thing on it. But thank you for your question. We have time for one more. Not a question, but Pat, I'm married to a school teacher. Understand the struggle there. Sending positive vibes to you and your family. Hoping for a quick recovery. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yes, my wife is doing fine. It's been tough. This thing's no joke, though, but thank you. I understand. And best wishes to your significant other as well. School teachers have a really hard job right now. And, going between virtual and real life. My wife is personally in school 5 days a week, so she's right up against it, doing the best that she can for her kids. But anyway, we are at the end of time. Thank you all so much for joining me. 5 years. Here's to 5 more. I will see you next time. I say this every time. Thank you so much. This is my favorite part of my job, and I wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. So thank you so much. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next month.